Welcome to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation's webinar today. Our program will begin shortly. Hello and welcome to the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation's webinar, Riding Out the Storm, Managing Emotional Intensity in Children. My name is Heather Held, and I'm the Director of Family Support here at the Pediatric Brain Tumor Foundation. Thank you all for joining us today for this really important subject. Before we get started, there's just a few guidelines I want to review. You are muted for this webinar and your video is disabled, but we welcome questions during and after the opening remarks. Please type your questions into the Q&A feature found at the bottom of the Zoom window. We will not get to every question today, but we are certainly going to try to get to as many as possible. We are pleased to welcome with us today Dr. Matthew Zakreski for today's webinar. Dr. Matt is a high-energy, creative clinical psychologist and professional speaker who utilizes an eclectic approach to meet the specific needs of his neurodivergent clients. He is proud to serve the gifted community as a consultant, a professor, an author, and a researcher. He's spoken over 400 times all over the world about supporting neurodivergent children. Dr. Matt is a member of Supporting the Emotional Needs of the Gifted, the National Association for Gifted Children, the New Jersey Association for Gifted Children, and Pennsylvania Association for Gifted Education. Dr. Matt graduated from Widener University's Institute for Graduate Clinical Psychology in 2016, and he is the co-founder of the Neurodiversity Collective. Another little side note on Dr. Matt is he is a brain tumor survivor as well. Dr. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will turn it over to you now.
Well, thank you for the lovely introduction. And yes, it is great to be here, and thank all of you so much for giving up your Thursday. Well, for many of us, it's the afternoon, I guess, depending on where you are, it might still be the morning. So here we go. Pull this up right here. Come on, you. All right. So yes, I'm Dr. Matt, and that's what everybody calls me, so feel free to do the same. And I am a clinical psychologist, professional speaker, and I'm an advocate for neurodivergent kids and their families. And yes, as Heather said, I'm a brain tumor survivor. So in 2001, in November of my senior year of high school, I started getting these really weird headaches. And I went for an MRI. And while I was bebopping my way through a normal Wednesday in high school, my parents were having lots of panicked phone calls with my pediatrician and neurologist as they had found a walnut-sized astrocytoma in my right lateral ventricle. And I know that these are words that this community knows far too well. So in the work I do as a psychologist who specializes in working with gifted kids, I would say that that work is personal and professional for me because I grew up as a gifted kid in New Jersey in the 90s and was diagnosed with ADHD in high school. So the neurodivergent community is my home. So it's very much a personal thing for me. And this talk that we're doing today feels even more personal. So I want to offer myself as a resource to this community, both in this PowerPoint, but also in our Q&A and however things spill out from there. So what are we going to do today? We're going to learn how to better manage our emotional outbursts using the language in psychology we call the big three: frequency, intensity, and duration. We're going to increase our understanding of where those big feelings come from. and develop the language to talk about emotional intelligence. What we're not going to do today is teach our kids not to have feelings. And yes, as parents, our lives would be a lot easier if our kids didn't have big feelings. Walking to the bus stop today, my son saw a bee and basically I'd spend the next 5 minutes consoling him. But living life without feelings is not a meaningful strategy. That's why we use the idea of the big three. We want to feel the feelings less frequently, less intensely, and for shorter periods of time. And we're not going to give up. If you set your goal as a parent here that I want my kid to be happy, I want my kid to be regulated, I want my kid to never have a bad day, well, then you're going to fail at that goal because that's not possible. But what we can do is deepen our toolboxes as the grown-ups who love our kids to give them more tools to manage these situations, and we go forward from there. So, I am a brain nerd, and I was a brain nerd before I had to learn way too much about my own brain in high school. And so here is what we call the limbic system. The limbic system is a series of structures in our brain that both create and move emotion around. So we have the hypothalamus, which is a relay system. The hippocampus is memory. The amygdala is what gives us our fight or flight emotions. The limbic cortex connects our feelings to the motivation that comes from them. And we could honestly spend the whole hour just talking about the limbic system. And if you do, you can meet me at the after party. That'll be super fun. But instead, we're going to focus on just these major key points. And then the prefrontal cortex is right here, the front part of your head. Now, if you imagine the limbic system like a highway, then our feelings are the cars that drive along that highway. Now, for a lot of our kids, their feelings are like a 2025 Ferrari Testarossa, right? A sleek, powerful, super fast car. The prefrontal cortex, which is supposed to regulate that stuff, is like the brake system on a 1988 Dodge Dart. It's not a great combination. So what we have is we have a brain that's wired for big feelings and a system responsible for regulating those feelings that is underwhelmed and underdeveloped. Not a great combo. And what that means is big feelings tend to turn into big behaviors. So we're going to talk about how the bigger the feelings our kids have, the more that connects to the output that we're going to see in the community. So now just to really drill this point home. Now I know because of the setup here, I can't really see you guys, but indulge me anyway. Um, give me a thumbs up if you'd be so kind. Now, as you give me a thumbs up, you can look at your thumbnail. The thumbnail is the size of the amygdala. That's the size, that's the part of your brain that gives you fight or flight emotions. So if you consider your brain is basically the size of your two fists put together, this tiny little part has this huge impact, right? And so this tiny little part of your brain can impact you so much. So we really want to make sure that we understand it so we can better frame our interactions around it. So here's our friend, the prefrontal cortex. Now, this is located in the frontal lobe, and these are where our executive functioning skills are. So planning, follow through, task initiation, task completion, self-regulation, a big part of what we're talking about today, time management, and sustaining attention. Now, all those things are vitally important, but I would like to particularly focus on behavioral inhibition. So let's see. This is a good way to do this. So we've got all these people here in our group today. So somebody jump into the chat and tell me what was the name of Taylor Swift's very successful concert tour? There we go. So we've got our errors Tor, right? And oh, the chat is disabled. So that explains that. I was I was sitting there, I was like, man, come on, y'all. Like even I know this. Um, well, I should have known that the chat was disabled. Um, so the the chat, regardless of the chat problem, yes, you guys know the idea here. Now imagine that you're getting that question in school. Let's say the question is, what's the capital of the United States? Or who is the first president of the United States? The kids are just going to shout out the answer because they don't want to go through the rigmarole of raising your hand, waiting to be called on, getting called on, saying the word, and then going back to their seat. So they're just going to shout out the word. That inability to inhibit or stop a behavior gets our kids. So, and what ends up happening is that all these things go through our brain to this poor prefrontal cortex, and it ends up looking like, now I'm from New Jersey, so I will use a local reference here. The this is what the highway getting off the highway to go to the beach looks like on a Friday afternoon in New Jersey in the summer. All these cars are trying to go to one place, and there's a bottleneck. When that bottleneck occurs, that's where mistakes happen, accidents, backups, people getting frustrated. So there's just too much stuff regulating through this one part of the brain, and mistakes are bound to occur. Oh, the chat's open now. Thank you, Heather. So, alrighty. So your body has two competing systems. Now, you may be familiar with your sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight system. When something scary happens, your body reacts, and it's a whole body response, right? That's what this chart is helpful in showing us, that it's from the size of our pupils to what our bladders are doing when we get big feelings. So you're probably familiar with fight or flight. What a lot of people are less familiar with is the competing system, the parasympathetic nervous system. Now, you can think of parasympathetic like parachute. It slows us down. So if the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight, parasympathetic is rest and digest. It brings our body back to baseline. And our body is going to do this on its own regardless, because big feelings are very draining to our body, whether they're uncomfortable feelings like sadness or anger or fear, or they're comfortable feelings like excitement or happiness. But all of those feelings take energy. So our body wants us to come back to baseline because then we're spending the least amount of energy. So now when our kids are upset, one of the physiological factors of the brain really kicks in and gets in our way. So you can conceptualize the brain as having two parts: the wizard brain, which is where our personality and our communication skills and our self-regulation skills, and it sits on top of the oldest part of our brain, the lizard brain. The lizard brain's job is to keep us alive. So when our kids get upset, the brain redirects all of its energy from the wizard brain to the lizard brain. So the wizard brain basically goes like the champagne cork, it pops off. And your kid is upset. Your kid is deep in their feels. And when our kids are upset, what's the first thing we do as parents? Now that the chat works, you guys can answer this question. There you go, right? And jump in, help them calm down. Oh, Molly Anderson, we're going to come back to that. Ask them what's wrong, tell them to use their words, try to tell me what's going on, calm down. All of that. You guys absolutely get it. And the problem is that even though our intentions are really good in that situation, the problem is that the part of the brain where all those coping and communication skills are is offline because the brain is so upset. Think about the last time your kids were really upset. Think about their eyes. They didn't really look like themselves, right? If you're having a panic attack, if you are having a meltdown, your brain is essentially offline. we need to help them get that good thinking brain back on track so we can layer that back in. What we're going to spend the back half of this presentation doing is strategies how to keep that thinking brain online. So, all right. Now let's take a quick survey, quick show of hands for my friends here. How many of you have ever been told in your lives to calm down? Now you can give me a hand raise. You can identify that in the chat. Look at all those hand raises. My goodness. You guys are truly my people. Even you, Jen. Oh my. The numbers just keep climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing and climbing. So, of course, now for all of you who've ever been told to calm down in your life, if that worked for you, if being told to calm down helped calm you down, keep your hand up. If it did not work to calm you down, you can take your hand down. Now look at those hands disappear. It's like asking for volunteers at a conference, right? So the idea here is asking somebody to calm down or asking somebody to say how they feel is a demand task. Demands stress out the system. Now, it's a necessary demand. We need to know what's wrong so we can help, but we need to shift forward in a way that understands that they're not able to calm down in those moments, because if they could, they would do so. They need our help to navigate that moment. Now, you're going to see in a lot of literature here, people say, like, you've got to be calm to calm down your kid. Now, I'm here to tell you that that's not true. It would be great if we were calm. It would certainly make things easier. But asking yourself to calm down is also a demand task. So that's going to stress us out. So what we want to do here is do co-regulation. Co-regulation is making space for our feelings as we help our kids manage their feelings. So when I said this morning, my son was scared of the bee, I was, say, your body looks very scared to me right now. And I'm scared that you're scared because I don't like my son to be scared. And he looked at me and said, Daddy, I don't want you to be scared. I said, okay, well, do you think we can be brave together? And he set his little jaw and he's like, let's do it. Now, this is all made more adorable that it's picture day and he's wearing a little kid tuxedo vest and a bow tie. So, it was just very adorable. He's adorable anyway, but he's very adorable today. So to get a hold of our own emotions, the first thing we need to do is check in with ourselves. What's making us upset? Are our needs being violated? Like you asked your kid to take out the garbage, your kid doesn't take out the garbage. That makes us feel dismissed or belittled. Is your kid's needs being violated? Is your kid being bullied at school? Do the teachers just not get that your kid is missing school because, oh, I don't know, they're having brain surgery and they're pushing back in a weird way? Or our society's needs are not being accommodated, like your kids refusing to shower, or you can't get the medication you need. Understanding what's making us angry helps us co-regulate because now we have some context around our own feelings, and then we can use that to create a space to talk about feelings with our kids. The second thing we do is we try to separate content from process. Now, our kids are the masters of content. They will give you all the words to keep from doing the thing and talk about the thing. I once I once was working at a school, and two kids got on a fight on the playground, and I said, "This is what we're gonna do. You guys just have to be on opposite ends of the playground today. We'll figure out your punishment later." And one of the kids proceeded to come up to me and quote the Geneva Convention and its rules against group punishment. So he's like, so basically, you're creating a war crime by not letting me play with my friends. Now, if I had responded to the actual words of that and fought back against the idea of me being a war criminal, which to the best of my knowledge, I'm not, I'd probably still be on that playground talking to him. But I was able to step out of the words to how did his words make me feel and why was he saying those words right now? He was angry at me, of course, but he was also hurt. And it felt like a big deal. It felt like a war crime. And that gave me the language to step back into that space and say, you know, dude, I get it. I get that this is frustrating for you. I get that this is not what you want. I have to make a decision to keep everybody safe. And if we all follow our jobs, we won't ever have to make this decision again. But I understand that you're so angry. I didn't like making this decision either. And by owning my own feelings and acknowledging his, I didn't give him a lot of space to continue to escalate. He was like, oh gosh, this person's being very reasonable. I need you to be upset that I'm upset. So, stepping from content to process is a great way to get out of the hamster wheel of doom of responding to every single thing our kids say and into the process of how do these sentences make me feel? That emotion is what my kid's trying to communicate to me. I'm going to start there. So the secret to all this is our brains and bodies want to return to homeostasis. They want to calm back down. And our brain will do that on its own eventually, but to make that faster, you need to say how you're feeling out loud. That's a request that engages the parasympathetic nervous system. And that code is, I'm feeling blank, whatever that feeling might be. And it's helpful if you say it out loud, but you can whisper it to yourself. You can write it down and say it in your head. You can text it to your mom, whatever it is you need to do. But when you say the thing, your parasympathetic nervous system goes, oh, that's why I'm so activated right now. I'm feeling X. Well, now that I am feeling X, I'm gonna calm down like I do when I feel X. So it directly connects the calm down strategies to the feelings we're feeling. Now, because I attempt to put my money where my mouth is, I will now tell you guys a very embarrassing story about myself and a time that this worked. So, as you guys heard in the presentation in my bio, I've spoken hundreds of times all over the world. Um, and the very first time I ever did a professional talk at a national conference was in Chicago in 2017. And my wife and I got up early from where we lived in Philadelphia. We flew from Philly to Chicago. We took an Uber from the airport to the hotel. We checked into the hotel. So we got up at 5 a.m. East Coast time. We got to Chicago at 12:30. And by the time we got to the hotel and dropped our bags off, it is now 1:30 Chicago time. And so my body thinks it's 2:30. And all I've had to eat so far today is a cup of coffee and a bagel. So I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm hungry. And my wife's like, give me 5 minutes to freshen up and then we'll go and get a sandwich. So I'm walking around the hotel room, and it was one of those hotel rooms where you need to take your key card and slip it into the little slot by the light switch to turn the lights on. Now, at the time, I did not travel very much. I had just finished grad school and was very, very poor. Now I travel all the time, so I'm used to those kind of hotel rooms. Not that day. So all I want to do while my wife is freshening up is I just want to watch 5 minutes of Sports Center, right? I just want to, that's how I'm going to self-care. And I'm stomping around the room trying to figure out how to turn the lights on, trying to figure out how to turn the TV on, and just getting madder and madder and madder. And my wife comes out of the bathroom and I'm like stomping around like a tiger in a cage. I'm like, and she's like, what's all this? And I was like, I'm just one on TV and I can. And she's like, so you look upset. I'm upset. How do you feel right now? I feel pissed off. And as soon as I said the off and pissed off, it was like a wave came over my body. It was like, oh. Because the thing is, we don't want to be angry. We don't want to be upset. It's unpleasant. As soon as I said that, my parasympathetic nervous system was like, oh, hey, let me help you regulate through that big feeling. Now, it doesn't always work that fast, but I share the story because it absolutely can work. Our bodies want to calm down. We have the tools to help. Now, having given this talk many times, it was, about a year and a half ago, I was giving this talk. I was in Oklahoma. And some woman raised her hand. She said, that's all well and good, Dr. Matt, but you said don't talk to the kids about their feelings, but also they should name the thing they're feeling so they can calm down. So how are both of those true? And I thought for a minute and said, well, damn, that was a very good question. Let me attempt to answer it for you. So what we have here is the emotion escalation cycle. Our kids are calm, something triggers them, they get agitated. Now, if we can catch that agitation before it escalates, that's the time where their wizard brain is still on top of their lizard brain. So be like, hey, you look like that just made you upset. What's going on? Well, yeah, I didn't like what Johnny said to me. Oh, yeah, I bet you didn't. Are you upset? I am upset. I don't like that. What we're doing is we're keeping the wizard brain alive. We're keeping it from escalating because we're naming the feeling. Now, you have multiple children, you have other stuff going on. Maybe you just got a really good tweet. I don't know. But sometimes we miss it and our kids accelerate and they get all the way up to the peak. In those moments, what we're going to do is we're just going to hold space for that feeling and let it run its course. Because as we talked about, adding verbal demands to that situation, it's only going to escalate our kids further. So we let them have their space, we let them have their feels. Once they start to calm back down, because like I said, the parasympathetic nervous system is going to do that on its own. Then we engage them in conversation. What happened? How are you feeling? Tell me what's going on. Then they're going to name their feelings and talk about what they're going through, which is going to increase the de-escalation and bring them down to baseline faster. So that's how we have both sides of that. So here's my number one rule, and it is super relevant for this community and the kids we're raising. You are allowed to feel however you want about anything you want. That is your right as a human being. But it's what you do with those feelings that matter. Now, our kids will often say to us, like, well, you're telling me I can't be scared? You're telling me I can't be mad? Nope, no one's ever going to say that to you. But you're not allowed to be mad and punch the doctor. You're not allowed to be scared and try and leap out of the car on the highway, right? It's what we do with those feelings that come from the big behaviors, the behaviors that come from the big feelings, that's what sets us apart. So one easy way to do this is there's always someone, but is anybody else in this group afraid of clowns? Heather, I knew you were my people. Any other clown phobes in here? Because I'm terrified of clowns. I do not like them. And so if you're somebody who's afraid of clowns, I'm allowed to be afraid of clowns, even though it doesn't make sense because I'm 40 years old, I'm a grown man. But I'm allowed to be afraid of them. What I'm not allowed to do is, shove my wife at the clown so I can escape the other direction. That's not cool. Right. So we're going to take our feelings and we're not going to get sucked into an argument about whether you're allowed to have that feeling. What we're going to do instead is we're going to validate that feeling and then see if we can workshop good strategies for managing it. So as we move into the skill building part of this, let me just reset some expectations. We are never going to get disruptive feelings to zero. That's just not how feelings work. But remember, frequency, intensity, and duration. So the goal of this is to not have your kid not be angry. Your goal is to have your kid be less angry, less often for shorter periods of time. The presence of a feeling or a meltdown does not mean that you or your kids failed. And it's so easy as a parent to be like, oh my gosh, Susie was having terrible nightmares, but we did some stuff and now she's not having nightmares. But then she had a nightmare again. Oh gosh, we failed. Everything's falling apart. The strategies that we're using don't work. No, because progress is not linear, consistent, or forever. Having a meltdown just means a meltdown occurred. We're going to pay attention to it, but we're not going to throw out our plan as a result. The impact of environment is real, and I think it's probably the single thing it's the single thing that we underestimate the most in working with kids. So if your kid is going to a new hospital, it stands to reason they would be more anxious. If your kid is in a crowded waiting room and they're used to walking right in and seeing the doctor, that's going to impact their behavior. We need to start by thinking about the impact of environments. So yes, and I'm gonna share these slides out with all of you guys when we're done. We're going to focus on skills, which is what the back half of this is for. Praise is way more powerful than punishment. Now, this is consistent with the work of the psychologist Ross Green. Kids do as well as they can. So if your kid is freaking out, if your kid is having a panic attack, if your kid is grumpy or upset or temper tantrumy, saying like, you shouldn't act like that, stop doing that, it's not helpful. They know they shouldn't be doing that. Praise is, I see how hard you're working to keep it together, or I see how hard this is for you and I want to help. I love how hard you're working on taking your deep breaths right now. When we praise the thing that reinforces it in the brain, it gives the brain a little bit more dopamine, which is going to make us more likely to be able to tap into our calm down strategies. Like I said in the beginning, this work is really hard. I went to 5 years of grad school for this, and I can tell you that this still kicks my butt on the daily, both with my clients and also with my own children. So this is really hard. Be gentle to yourself. And it's up to us, the parents, the teachers, the medical professionals, to help our kids regulate their emotions. That's what co-regulation is all about. Ah, Karen, that's beautiful. Yes, they're not giving you a hard time, they're having a hard time. You know, one of my one of my mentors early in my career said, as no matter how bad a kid will make you feel, their feeling absolutely is worse. And I've kept that with me because as a child psychologist, kids vent their stuff onto me all the time. Some of the stuff that I've been called or yelled at would make your hair stand on end. But it's not about me. It's just about their feelings. So a key thing here, as sort of a foundational premise, is that beneath every behavior is a feeling, beneath every feeling is a need. And when we focus on meeting the need rather than the behavior, we're dealing with the cause of the problem, not the symptom. So would anybody in this group say that they get hangry? Anybody here who's a member of the hangry committee? So now this they raise the hands for, right? We're like, oh yes, that's me. I'm awful. So, just to pick somebody at random, right? So it's like, say, Kate Baggs. So, Kate, I'm sure you are a very pleasant person. I'm sure that if you and I ran into each other on the street, we'd have a very pleasant conversation. But if I ran into Kate on the street in the morning where she missed breakfast and she hasn't gotten to eat lunch yet, and she's having those big hangry related feelings, I might think Kate is very unpleasant. I'd be like, oh, I don't want to talk to Kate anymore. But then I'm focusing on Kate's behavior. If I know that Kate tends to run a little hangry, I'm like, Kate, when was the last time you ate? And she says, dinner last night. I'm like, so Kate, I have a sandwich and I'm going to give you part of my sandwich so you can feel better. And then we've met Kate's need, Kate regulates, and then she's the pleasant, awesome person that we all know and love. So not to completely call you out here, Kate, but I'm seeing you're very pleasant. So the idea here is we want to focus on the needs not being met. It's a great first question to ask ourselves when our kids are upset. Are they tired? Are they hungry? Are they thirsty? Are they overstimulated? Are they understimulated? Is there something in the environment that's scaring them? When we focus on those needs, it's a lot easier to regulate those behaviors. So we're going to go through the back half of this. I'm going to introduce my co-pilot, Calvin from Calvin and Hobbes. Now, as a kid, I wanted nothing more in the world to be a professional cartoonist. And I would read Calvin and Hobbes books by the boatload and I would practice drawing them. So I have a particular soft spot for Calvin and his stuffed tiger. So, and I would argue that there's no cartoonist ever who is better at emotions on faces than Bill Watterson. So we want to increase our emotional awareness. Becoming aware of our feelings is a great way to increase our control over them, because kids tend to think feelings are just eyebrows and mouths, right? Just these two things. Because I'm mad, my eyebrows go down, I clench my teeth. I'm surprised, my eyebrows go up, my mouth goes open, right? But feelings impact our entire body, right? Um, you know, think about think about you're sitting on a roller coaster and the roller coaster is doing the click 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 part because it's going up, right? It's not just your eyebrows and your mouth that are feeling those feelings. Your chest is probably tense, your heart is racing, your hands are gripping onto the bar like it's a question of life and death, you're breathing faster, you're sweaty. Those are all body cues. The idea is that when our kids become more aware of the cues and tricks their body is sending them to tell us about their feelings, then they get out in front of it. I know that when I'm mad, this tendon right here in my jaw flares, right? So if something's making me pissed, I feel this thing go tense. I'm like, oh, I'm mad. I don't want to be mad. Let me see what I can do about that. It gets me out in front of it so I have fewer meltdowns myself as a grown up. So you can talk to your kids about what does your blank look like when you're angry? Eyes, mouth, forehead, nose, shoulders, arms, legs, feet, right? And then sub angry for anxious, worried, happy, excited, just increasing that emotional intelligence. And you may need to prime them. You look happy to me because you're smiling, you're bouncing in your chair and you're like, I can't wait, I can't wait, I can't wait. That's adults giving the kids the language to talk about this stuff. And I specifically mentioned feeling happy because we tend to only talk to our kids about their feelings when something's going wrong. When your kids are scared, angry, upset, nervous, melting down, right? So start someplace safe and accessible. If they're watching their favorite YouTube, if they are all about Danny Go and they're watching that, then you're like, hey, you look like you're really enjoying this. I am. What do you enjoy about it? I like this thing. I can tell you like this thing because of the hints your body is giving me. So you're reinforcing that stuff and increasing their awareness of their bodies. Outbursts. If I grow up to be some sort of psychopath because of all this, you'll be sorry. So kids are really good at what we call replacement language. Replacement language is when we skip over the feeling to what the feeling makes us want to do. So I'm not mad. I want to beat you up. I'm not scared. I feel like I'm going to die, right? We're skipping the feeling and getting to the impact of the feeling. Kids are really good at this because they don't really want to say their feelings. So, just as a quick show of hands, how many people in this group had siblings growing up? A lot of us had siblings. I had twin younger sisters. God bless them. Um, and for those of you who had siblings, it would stand to reason that probably at some point in your life you said to your siblings, I'll kill you. Anybody in this group ever say that? This is a safe place. Uh, I know I said that to my siblings. So what that means, and going out on a limb and guessing that none of you actually murdered your siblings, it's a way for us to express that we're angry, we're hurt, we're embarrassed. Now, I'm not saying that's a great choice, but if we see it as a replacement for the feeling itself, it becomes a lot easier to manage. Uh, Lakeisha knows what I'm talking about. So we validate the feeling first. I'm sorry to feel that way. And then we move into how we can help. Because one of the mistakes we make as adults is we tend to argue with kids' feelings because we don't want them to feel upset. So if your kid comes home from school and says, all my friends hate me, our instinct as adults is to go, no, they don't. So we just told the kid that their feeling is wrong. Now, we don't mean it that way, but it absolutely comes across that way. So it's like, whoa, I'm sorry to hear that. Tell me more. And then, yeah, 99 times out of 100, it's going to end up being not a very big deal. But by showing we listen, we're cutting through the replacement language and getting to the feeling. So you can prompt those feelings terms and just get more information, right? It's like, hey, I'm just trying to understand, right? The more we know, the more we can help. Verbal aggression, everybody's favorite thing to deal with. So this is back to our friend content versus process. So I'm going to tell you guys a story from a different school I've worked at. I've worked at many schools. So I work at a school for neurodivergent kids, and I'm in my office. I get a call on the walkie that one of my kids, one of my frequent flyers, is having a tough time on the playground. So I head down there. Now I'll call this kid John for the purposes of this story, not his real name. And John's in there and like cartoon smoke is coming out of his ears, right? He's having a bad day. And so I'm sitting there and I sit down next to John. And he's like, don't make me talk about this, Dr. Matt. I'm not gonna make you talk about it. I'm just gonna sit here with you. So we sat there for a while. and we're watching. And I was like, how are you doing? He's like, I'm doing bad, doing really bad. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And he said, Dr. Matt, if you ask me any more questions about my feelings, and here's the direct quote, I'm going to chop your body up with rusty hatchets and leave it over there in the culvert so beavers will eat your corpse. It's the sort of sentence that sticks with you. I've been doing this work a long time. That's the only time I've ever heard that sentence. It's probably, God willing, it's the only time I'll ever hear it. And I was like, wow, you're really mad. And he looked at me like in that sort of expectant, like, you're supposed to be very upset about this. I was like, boy, you did a great job telling me how angry you are. And a little while later, I was like, so you're angry enough to want to chop me up with rusty hatchets. What made you so mad? He said, I got picked last for kickball. Now, you might be sitting there wherever you are thinking, that is a ridiculous thing to be that upset about being picked last for kickball. But remember, feelings can't be wrong. It's what we do with them. Threatening to murder the school counselor, not an ideal choice, right? We want to think about something a little bit more pro-social. So, but once I knew, I was like, well, I've got an idea. Why don't we get back over there? I'll be automatic pitcher and you can join one of the teams. And he was like, that's great. So we went over there. I jumped in. They played a great game of kickball. Easy peasy. As we're walking up, I was like, all right, buddy, John, we got to talk for a second. He's like, I'm in trouble. I did bad. I'm like, honestly, dude, you're not in trouble because I know you, right? But because I know you, I was able to, and I use this language with my clients. I'm like, I was able to move from the content of what you said to the process. You were hurt and upset, so you were trying to get me to go away. But if I didn't know you, if I was an adult who was a substitute teacher or someone who was just walking by, they would hear that a kid is threatening to murder an adult and they would call the police because the words that you said mean that thing. And he started to get upset. He said, but that's not what I mean. I was like, I know that's not what you meant, but we've got to be clear about how we do that. So verbal aggression is pretty high stakes in terms of intervening. We need to figure out the context as quickly as possible. Think about who knows it and get away from the person situation if you can. So if your kid is in the hospital bed and the doctor or the nurse or the PA is making them upset, sometimes it's better to just say, hey, listen, can you leave for 3 minutes? Can you let us reset and then we'll try again? Because they've got rounds to do, they've got other people to see. Sometimes it makes more sense to just change the setting. And if you can't change the physical setting where you are, changing what's in the setting can solve that problem. Have that safe person to talk to. One of the kids I work with, his safe person at his middle school is the janitor, because all this kid wants to be in his life is a mechanical engineer, and the janitor fixes the boiler. So they're just buddies. So when this kid's having a tough time, he goes and helps the janitor around the school for a little bit. It's awesome. It's adorable. Um, and especially for our older kids, and really for us as adults, if we're talking to our treatment teams, never text or email angry. Now, this is such an important thing. Couple months ago, I was asked to consult with on a case up here in North Jersey where we had a high school theater group. We've got the kid who wanted the lead in the play. She doesn't get the lead in the play. So she goes out and she tweets, the only reason I can get the lead in Sleeping Beauty is because at student is sleeping with at teacher. So not only did she tweet that, she added both people. And she took it down within the hour, but that was well long enough for it to be screenshotted, shared, and there had to be an investigation. And she was embarrassed, the school was embarrassed, the teacher was embarrassed, and ultimately they found that nothing was happening because nothing had been happening. But then the teacher said to the student, I don't feel comfortable with you being in my cast, which was a very reasonable way for him to feel. So I tell kids, you put those words out there when you're upset and they are justified because of how angry or upset or scared you are in that moment. But that feeling is going to fade a lot longer. And then those words are going to be out there on the internet forever. Because all it takes is one person to screenshot it, share it, tweet it, whatever that thing is. So if you're upset, put your phone on airplane mode. Leave your phone in your car and go in your house, or leave your phone in the house and get in your car. Those are the moments where it makes the most sense to be away from your device, because it is far too easy to fire off an email, a text, a tweet, a post that makes things worse, not better. In public. So the stakes for emotional meltdowns in public are higher, or at least they feel higher. One thing you can do to make this easier is do what I like to call the 5-minute minivan conversation. You pull into the parking lot of Target, you say, okay, here's the deal. We got to go to Target. We got to buy some pants. I know you don't want to buy pants. Nobody wants to go buy pants, but you got to go buy the pants. So we're going to be in there for like 20 minutes. I don't know who we're going to see because it's a public place, but we don't expect to see anybody. I need you to try on a couple pairs of pants, and then you can sit and chill out, and I'll find the rest of the pairs you need. Let's check in to see what tools we have to help us be successful. Now, this is an opportunity as parents for us to stash in the car a go bag. The go bag is filled with preferred items for your kiddo that you can use when you're out in the community. So if your eldest is getting medical treatment for their brain tumor, but you've got other kids and you can't have them sit in the waiting room for 3 hours reading like, Better Homes and Gardens magazine, we want to have a go bag for those kids. So it's got the books they want to read, coloring pages, maybe an old school iPod, a Rubik's Cube, stuffed animals, the Sudoku book, whatever that thing is, but have those resources with you. It's the biggest difference between kids who feel empowered when they're in the community and kids who feel anxious in the community. You also want to give your kids a code word, because a lot of times kids are used to adults saying to them, your feelings have become a problem. The adult noticed and now I'm in trouble. If you give your kid a code word, they're inside of the solution. They're using their own emotional intelligence to say, I need help. So when I'm in the community with my kids, especially if we're like at a big gathering, something that might make them anxious, I say to my son, because he loves dinosaurs, I'm like, if you come up to me and say, Dad, can I go see the dinosaur? That tells me that you need a break, you need help. For my daughter, it's what is the word she's using? Banana pancakes. I don't know why she chose that, but that's where we're at. And she's like, can I have some banana pancakes? I'm like, yes, let's go try and find some. And then we just take a little break and she tells me what she needs. But giving kids that code word, whether it's in school, in the community, at a family party, at a quinceañera, whatever it is, that code word gives you that thing that says, hey, my kid needs me. They've used the word, let's see what we can go to do. Because having them articulate what's wrong when they're starting to get upset may not be a thing they're able to do. Remember, wizard brain, lizard brain, right? But the kid can probably hold it together enough to say banana pancakes so you know what to do next. So we do lots of check-ins. We think about our kids' triggers. For a lot of our kids, public restrooms are a trigger. So think about like, what's the smallest public restroom we can use? Do we have a different kind of toilet we can get at? Don't panic. It's very hard to do, but if we panic, then we aren't as helpful to our kids. Think about what your needs are versus what the kids' needs are. If it's a Saturday and you're trying to get to Home Depot, then Target, then the grocery store, and you go to Home Depot and it's fine, you go to Target, it's fine, but your kid's starting to melt down before you get to the grocery store, just go home. You can always go back later. You lose the battle to win the war. As parents, right, we're always playing the long game. And you may be like, oh, but I really need to go to the grocery store. Well, A, you can definitely go to the grocery store later. And B, if that's the most important thing, you should probably go first. Now, with all these great strategies and techniques and psychological minded language that we're using, hooray for us. Sometimes it's still going to blow up in our faces, right? So this is where I will say this to you all as someone who empathizes with your position and loves you very much. If you haven't carried your kid out of Target like a football running back, are you even a parent? So what I will invite us to do, if you're feeling brave, if you have ever thrown your kid over your shoulder like a sack of potatoes and carried them out of a public place, raise your hand. And I am a relatively famous child psychologist. So I'm saying, be like, yeah, that's definitely a thing that happens sometimes, right? And I appreciate everybody who's raising their hands, right? You're in good company, right? Guys, parenting is really hard, right? Sometimes every strategy we have doesn't work and we just got to get out of there. We leave our cart and we come back later. Disappointment. So we tend to rush to fix the problem, and that can minimize our kids' pain, right? Um, and it opens us up as adults to those okay boomer moments. I actually have a client on my caseload who is a brain tumor survivor, and he was telling me that when he was diagnosed, his stepdad, he's like, ah, yes, son, when I was in high school, I broke my leg playing football. And this kid was like, that is not the same at all, right? Broken leg, objectively a bad thing. It's not a brain tumor, right? So you can always ask if you can share a similar anecdote, but it's one of those things that you want to ask permission, and if the kid says no, you give them their space. Let's see. So I'm gonna look at my list here, try to see where my dads are at. I see probably a couple dads here. So this is relevant for all parents, but I'm going to speak specifically to the dads because dads tend to be worse at this. An upset kid is not the time for a capital L life lesson. Your kiddo comes home in tears because they didn't make the soccer team. And you know in your head that if they had just listened to you and gone to training and seen the personal trainer and done their practice and their running, they would have made the team. But when your kid is sobbing at the dinner table, that's not the right moment to say, well, I told you so, son. That's a great way to burn that bridge with your kid. So we empathize first. You seem really upset. I'm sorry it didn't go your way. And you know, in their heart of hearts, they know what they need to do different. When they're ready, we'll talk about what we can do to fix the problem right now, later, and a month from now, and a year from now, right? And the best thing that happened to me when I was diagnosed with my brain tumor is that nobody tried to fix the problem. It was an unfixable problem. People just sat with me in my living room and they held space, right? And people very quickly started talking about, like, once your surgery is over, I'll bring you whatever you need. In a year from now, when you're recovered, we're going to have the most epic celebration ever. Like, they started layering those things out there, thinking about what they could do to help me in the future, because we knew there wasn't much I could do right now. Panic. So we all have different trigger items and levels of response. You want to get to know your kid, their specific fears and phobias. Keep that open dialogue, maintain that emotional communication. And if they're starting to get upset and agitated, you can concretize their feeling. So if they've got actually, you know what, Heather, do you mind jumping on camera and mute for a second? Hi, Heather. Do
Hi.
you mind helping me out with this real quick?
Sure.
Excellent. This is one of those things that doesn't work as well over text, so we can just do this live.
All
All right.
right.
Heather, is there anything you're worried about right now in your life?
Anything I'm worried about right now in my life? Um, um, yes. My
I
daughter
mean,
is getting married.
that is a very good thing to be worried about. So,
It's a
Heather,
big worry.
yeah, that's a big one, right? So tell me, where is that feeling living in your body right now?
When I talk about it in my stomach.
That is often where anxiety lives. Anxiety tends to live in our stomachs. Fear tends to live in our heads. I don't know why. That's just where it tends to be. So you got anxiety in your stomach. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big is that feeling?
In this exact moment, a 3. Two
Excellent.
nights ago on the budget, like a 9.
There you go, right? What that tells us is that feelings can shift over time, right? When they're
Yep.
in the feeling, it's like, it will always be a 9 forever, and this is my life now. But like, sometimes it'll just go back down to a 3. So we'll use today's, it's a 3. So you have got a feeling of anxiety that lives in your stomach, that's a 3. What color is it?
Blue.
Hmm, makes sense. We have a blue 3 that lives in your stomach. If you could touch it, what texture would it have?
Squishy.
Squishy. What people always say anxiety is squishy. To me, anxiety would be sticky, but
Mm.
this is your thing, not mine. Uh,
Squishy.
what shape is it?
It's like that green blob monster.
Love it, right? So we have a green, well, a blue blob
Blue.
monster. That's a 3 that's in your stomach, right?
Mhm.
So, and we could keep doing this, right? But the idea here is by asking these questions, we're concretizing the feeling. We're making it move from this sort of like ephemeral concept to something that it's much easier for me to think of a blue blob monster in your stomach, right?
Mhm. Yep.
And that helps keep that wizard brain online. Because every time I ask you a question, your brain's going, I'm anxious, but I have to answer this question. I'm anxious, but I have to answer this question. It's keeping the wizard brain in. So if you can ask those questions, it makes it concrete and your kid's much more likely to get through it. So thank you, Heather.
You're
We didn't
welcome.
rehearse that, but you did very well.
Thank you.
So when we feel anxious or panicky, our bodies want to escape. Um, we can escape mentally, physically, or socially. We've got our phones. That's often an easy escape. Think about how you might escape by having a friend there, someone to talk to. You know, just thinking about the different ways we might need to get out of the situation. Then we've got peer difficulties. Other people make living very difficult because we cannot control other people's behavior or their reactions. Now, it's important to remember in these moments that let's see, Amy, um, oh, okay, Amy, that's a fabulous question. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hold that for right now, but in about 7 minutes when we get to questions, I will dive in with that one. Is that okay? So, there are always other possible explanations for people's behavior. We tend to interpret neutral stimulus as bad. So if I'm walking down the hallway and I see Jonathan Kehoe coming in the direction, I'm like, "Hey, Jonathan, what's up?" And Jonathan does not say hi to me. My brain goes, "Jonathan's mad at me. Jonathan's upset. I've done something wrong." And thoughts lead to feelings, which lead to behavior. So I think Jonathan's mad at me. I get upset, and that upsetness shows up in my behavior towards Jonathan. And he's like, "What? Why are you being weird to me?" Which makes him upset to me, proving me right. So what I prompt my kids to say is like, it's like, okay, it is possible that they're not talking to you because they're mad at you. What's another possible explanation? And sometimes kids will get stuck in the, well, they're not mad at me, they're pissed at me. They're furious with me, they're sad with me. Yep, those are all options. If they're having trouble, I'll do something ridiculous. I'll be like, well, it's clear that they've been replaced by a replicant, and the replicant doesn't know to say hi to you, and they'll roll their eyes as they do, and they're like, no, that's not it. Is it possible that they have their AirPods in and they just can't hear you? Is it possible that they just failed the math test and they're not thinking about anything other than that 71 on a math test, right? When we get those other explanations, what we do is we build in cognitive flexibility. The more flexible our brains are, the more emotionally stable they are, because we're not just overcommitting to one explanation, we're considering a lot of different things. We want to have positive exposure to the things that make us stressed, whether those are people or things. One vital, anything, Jonathan, anything for you. Um, any, we talked about the power of set kids up for success. If your kid has spent a lot of time alone in hospitals or dealing with that sort of thing, they might not be ready for a 45-person birthday party sweet 16. That's a lot. It might be smarter to go to that for an hour and then dip. It might be smarter to take the birthday kid out to dinner or coffee or a movie. One of my kiddos that I work with, he's autistic. He just knows, he's like, I'm not a birthday party person. Anything more than 8 people, it's tough for me. But he does a great job as he will find the thing that kid wants to do. He's like, you're really into action movies. I would like to take you to an action movie for your birthday. And that's how he does it. And people have been very responsive to that. So why do I call this talk riding out the storm? So to me, big feelings are like thunderstorms. They are scary, they're intense, they seem to come out of nowhere, they can ruin your day. So the first thing you do when you see a thunderstorm is you get someplace safe. You're allowed to be upset, disappointed, even scared by the thunderstorm. but getting angry at the thunderstorm is not helpful. In fact, it can actually be dangerous. If you run into the backyard and scream at the thunderstorm, you are drastically increasing your chances of being struck by lightning. All storms pass eventually, and most are shorter than you think. So one really interesting statistic from the National Weather Service is your average thunderstorm lasts 30 minutes. Now, that's a long time, but that 30 minutes includes the thunderstorms from hurricanes and nor'easters. So if you strip those data out, your average regular thunderstorm lasts 8 minutes. And we can survive anything for 8 minutes, right? So we clean up and we get back to what we were doing. Now, in order to get back to what we're doing, when the storm's over, when we can both be focused and calm, that might be an hour from now, that might be tomorrow, it might be a week from now, but we always return to it and we do that debrief, right? We just, first off, we start with non-judgmental. What happened? What made me feel that way? What was the impact of my actions? Think about what all of us can learn. That can be parents, teachers, doctors, nurses, kid, their peers, whatever it is. You know, I remember getting I worked on a pediatric cancer case when I was in grad school at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And this young woman who was my client, all she wanted to do in the world was watch Victorious on Nickelodeon. That was what she wanted to do. And this one PT just kept coming in when Victorious was on, to the point where I was like, hey, listen, I know you got a job to do. Don't come in from 7:30 to 8. This is her show. And he's like, I've got a job to do. I was like, I know you have a job to do, right? But she's getting mad at you, which is making it harder for both of you to do your jobs. So let's just take a minute and you come either at 7:15 or 8:15 and you'll be fine. And the thing with thunderstorms, right, is that they're going to happen again. The trick is to see the thunderstorm coming and be proactive. I grew up on the Jersey Shore, and the Jersey Shore in the summer, there's a thunderstorm basically every day at 6 o'clock. You can set your watch by it. The humidity builds up, thunderstorm comes down. So people don't schedule much outside at 6 o'clock in New Jersey in the summer. We wait for the storm to be over, and then we go out to dinner, right? So now this goes all the way back to the top of our thing today. And I think it was Molly Anderson who said, when our kids are upset, we jump in and try to help them calm down. So when I was younger, I was a lifeguard. And the first thing they teach you in lifeguard school is if someone is struggling in the water, you bring something to help them. If it's a surfboard, life preserver, floaties, whatever it is. Because what people do when they're upset and they're struggling in the water is they grab you and then you sink. And I cannot tell you how many times I had to, one person rescue turned into a two-person rescue because somebody's dad or best friend or girlfriend would go out there to try and help them. And now I've got two people to save. So what I tell parents is don't be the lifeguard, be the lighthouse. Lighthouses are stable and secure. They never turn off. They're always a point of focus that we can say, there's the lighthouse, that's where I need to go. If the lighthouse sees the boat on the water is in trouble, it can call for extra help. But if the lighthouse keeper leaves the lighthouse to go help the boat, then the lighthouse keeper has diminished their own ability to help. So this is what co-regulation is. When their storm meets our calm, that's how we co-regulate, right? We've got resources and tools that we have that we can use no matter how much trouble the ship is in. So don't be the lifeguard. Don't jump in that water. Be the lighthouse. So skills for parents, just sort of to quickly hit these, practice what we preach, emotional modeling our behavior. That's going to come from a very authentic place because you guys are going through a lot of big feelings as well. We use a lot of meta communication. We talk about our talking to whatever extent you remove your ego. Not easy, but you know, this isn't about us, it's about our kids. Being proactive goes a long way. So we check in. Emotions are normal and they have no value. So they're not good or bad feelings. They're comfortable or uncomfortable feelings. Because being angry isn't a bad feeling. There are times in life it's appropriate to be angry, but being angry is not a very comfortable feeling. And then we always want to avoid shoulds. To me, should is the possibility of could plus shame. So if you say to your kid, you should be handling this better, well, no, they shouldn't. They could be handling it better. But by asking this around a could, we open it up for possibilities and additional problem solving. So you could be handling this better. What's getting in your way? You should have passed that math test. You could have passed that math test. What got in your way? Well, we were at the hospital till 1 a.m. last night, Dad, and I didn't have time to study. That's a pretty good reason to fail a math test. So why do we work so hard at this? So this is actually another kid from that same school. So this is from the Calvin and Hobbes storyline where Calvin breaks his dad's binoculars, and you can see Dad is justifiably upset. He's having a big feel. And then if you look at Calvin's face in the last panel here, I have an idea, Dad. Let's pretend I already feel terrible about it and you don't need to rub it in anymore. So when I worked at this school, the school's in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania, there's a law that if the temperature is lower than 36 degrees, you got to wear a coat outside for recess. It's the law. So one day we're in the cafeteria. I'm checking my watch. I'm checking the temperature. Guys, all right, it's 35 degrees. Everybody on your coats are going out for recess. And one of the kiddos, I'll call him Mike. I had a great relationship with him. He was on my Frisbee team. And he looks me dead in the eye. He's like, I won't. I'm like, buddy, just put on your coat. Let's go outside for recess. We'll throw a Frisbee around. And he's like, no, I won't. And he proceeded to scream at me for the next 20 minutes. He called me every name under the sun, right? And I'm a human being, right? I got frustrated and I was like, dude, stop talking to me like this. This is not the relationship we have. This is inappropriate. What's going on? After 20 minutes, I finally was like, okay, wait, stop. This is not the relationship you and I have. And this is not how you normally act. Something has changed. Tell me what's different. And he looks at me, he's like, you wouldn't get it. Now, you know when a teen says that to you, okay, hey, we're close to the answer. I'm like, try me, bud. If you try me, I can help you. And he looked at me, and after 20 minutes of screaming, he looked at me and he was like, my coat's from Goodwill. So at a school where the tuition was $63,000 a year, and everybody else was wearing really nice North Faces and ski jackets, and they had the cool tags and the hats and all that stuff. This kid's coat was from Goodwill because he was on full financial assistance. And when you're 13, that shit matters a lot. And what happened in that moment is he and I shifted from me versus him to me and him versus the problem. So I looked at him, was like, cool, buddy, wear my coat. He's like, wait, really? I'm like, yeah. Gave him my coat. We walked outside. I was a little nippy for 20 minutes. I lived. And that night I called one of the trustees. I was like, you need to get this kid a coat right away. And would you believe it, the next day there was a brand new North Face waiting for that kid in his locker. Now I tell this story because 99 times out of 100, the reason our kids are upset and acting out is not to piss us off. It's because their hearts are breaking. Something is wrong. So when we can pivot from it's me versus my kid to it's me and my kid versus the problem, we anchor all of the good interventions that come from that in a place of love and respect and understanding. So a lot of additional resources here. Like I said, you guys are gonna get these slides. I would definitely recommend you read the YouTube, you watch the YouTubes. They're both TED Talks. Here's how you track me down. You guys are gonna get these slides, but I want to make sure we see some time for questions. But you guys were a tremendous audience. Thank you for coming along on this journey with us. So give yourselves a big round of applause. And I promised Amy that I would answer her question, so I will just dive right in there. So Amy said, "Oh, I guess Heather, were we going to stop the recording for the Q&A?"
No, we'll keep the recording going.
I know some places I didn't remember what the answer was. Okay, so Amy says you mentioned carrying your kid out of Target if things go south. What about teens? Yes, you cannot pick up your 5'9" 14-year-old. So rage is tricky. Rage is really scary. It's hard to deal with. So, so one of the things we do is we think about the different levels of engagement when you're in public. Am I with my parent helping them do the thing? Am I just there? Am I sitting in the car? Am I sitting on a bench? So helping your kid to understand what their other options are, the other pathways, it moves us from a situation of I have to get this kid out of here versus to something that hopefully is more proactive. Now, if you get into that situation, what I tell kids all the time is like, listen, my number one job is to keep you safe. Right now, you're not being safe. Now, I would like very much to resolve the situation myself with just me and you. But if I need to bring in another grown up to help keep you safe, I'm going to have to. Now, we can call dad, we can call the security guard here at the store. I don't want to do either of those things. Is there a way that you and I can handle this together? So I don't threaten them. I'm not like, you, I'm going to call the cops. It's like, hey, my job is to keep you safe. Sometimes I need extra help for that. That can sort of put a nice bracket around it and give us a way to exit the store peacefully. So it's absolutely a tricky situation. My heart goes out to you. If you want, Amy, I have a whole separate PowerPoint just on anger. Shoot me an email and I'll send that over to you. Karen asks, how do you know what's causing the behavior, or does it matter? Yeah, I think that it's so tempting in this work to want there to be a smoking gun. The medication caused the behavior, puberty caused the behavior. Sometimes kids just act in different ways. That's why we focus on skills that generalize, like naming feelings, taking breaks, deep breathing, having that 5-minute minivan conversation. Those things apply to all feelings, regardless of what's causing them, but you always want to bring up those changes you see to your team, the doctors, the nurses, the mental health professionals, because as a parent, you're the boots on the ground. You have a lot more operational knowledge than I do. I want to see what you're seeing. Um, so Betsy asks, how do we implement these with a 2.5-year-old who doesn't have a lot of communication skills? You can go full out and you can get them a PECS board, PECS, photo exchange communication system, and you can have your kid carry on, just they can point to different shapes or images that show how they're feeling. Your kid might not be able to say, I need to leave this place, but they can point to a picture of a door. That can be very helpful. Um, you can also strip down all the other surrounding language, and you use what we call the forced choice paradigm. Stay or go. Sit or walk, right? When you cut out a lot of those things, you give kids A or B options. It keeps their brain from like sort of spinning off into nothingness, makes it nice and focused. So that's a good strategy there. How do you handle it when your kid is giving you attitude, when you're trying to help them with your homework? Oh, yes, that's yeah, that never ends. It's important to ask your kid if they need your help or if they want your help. And the kid says, yes, but not like that. Cool. How would you like me to help you? It's helpful as parents to not have to guess what our kids need, but to put them in a position to say what they need from us. Now, they may not know. They might just be acting out to act out. It's like, okay, well, listen, I'd love to help you. I'm here as a resource, right? Um, so I'll come check on you in an hour or so, but you've got this. Don't feel like you've got to solve every problem for your kid, because doing nothing is doing something. Sometimes we make things worse by just being in the space with our kids. And if they take 10, 15 minutes to try it on their own and fail and then ask for help, that's going to predict a much better outcome moving forward. All right. So Heather, I knocked out a few of those. Do you want to get to some of the questions we had from the earlier part?
Yeah, let me pull this up really quick. How to handle extreme outbursts. She wants to do everything on her own, but she's 4. And so some of these things are dangerous. If I say no, it's an all and out meltdown.
So she's 4. So we're in a situation where we can't get a lot of insightful communication, right? Um, so this is where we get to what I like to call a third door solution. So kids like to sort of pull us into these situations where it's all or nothing. I mean, I either win and get what I want, or I lose and I have to listen to mom or dad. A third door solution is an inherent compromise. So it honors our kids' experience, their likes or dislikes. Um, and you can use that to see if you can co-strategize a plan. So let's say, for argument's sake, right, your kiddo wants to go on a roller coaster and they're 4, they can't go on a roller coaster. You're like, okay, I know you want to go on the roller coaster. We can't. Here are the rides that we can go on. Which one would you like to do? Right. And then would you like to do that by yourself or with me? So what we'll do is it's very similar to co-regulating, because we are acknowledging how they feel and acknowledging how we feel and seeing if we can meet in the middle. So that's often a helpful strategy. And I would encourage you parents to use that language with your kids. Call it a third door solution. We are looking for a third door solution right now because that's a compromise. And kids will be surprisingly engaged to help you find a solution.
As my son moves into his teenage years, he's starting to truly grapple with what the diagnosis means long term. He's now 13 and was diagnosed at 4. But how do we balance the hopefulness and potential reality and help him with that? That's a big question.
That's a big question, and it's so relevant for this community. And I actually, Heather, when we were talking about what things we should do, I do
Yeah.
have that talk on hope. I almost think, well, I think we should definitely do it at some point.
Okay.
Um, Provided I haven't spent the last 78 minutes sticking my foot in my mouth. And if I've done that, then I'm sorry.
No.
Um, um, but one of the things, especially for a teen, is teens are allergic to bullshit, right? Kids they don't want you to blow smoke up their butt. They don't want you to pretend things are fine. It doesn't mean you have to go doom and gloom. You can go into the middle. It's like, listen, things are hard. They're going to be hard for a while. I don't know what the future holds, but we have this information from our doctors, this information from the nurses, this information from the mental health professionals. We have all these reasons to believe it's going to either be okay or get better, and God willing, both, right? But you can tell your kid, because anxiety always yanks us to the future, right? So that sounds like an anxiety question to me, grappling with what the future of this means. Will I be able to go to college? Will I be able to play high school volleyball? Will I be able to go to my prom? I always say, you be honest with your kids first, right? And it's like, hey, nothing would make me happier than you getting to do those things. And I will do whatever is in my power to make those things happen, right? That is your kid will absolutely respect that answer. And it gives us a good target for us to work for together.
I want to stay in the teens for a minute. There is a question from Sandra that's in our Q&A. I don't know if you're seeing it.
Uh,
She's talking about her daughter, who was 13 when her brain tumor was removed and now 15, and the anxiety is terrible and making her physically nauseous. Most of the anxiety, she thinks, stems from wanting to blend in. She's been known as the brain tumor kid, and now she doesn't want to make one move that is abnormal or gets made fun of or gets her noticed.
yeah.
Teenagers are vicious, but what are words that don't negate her emotion but help her grow out of this anxiety? And when we talk about teens, that anxiety in this journey is so heavy.
So heavy, right? That's a phenomenal question. So this is where, having a really good mental health professional is going to be helpful, because these strategies, they're not one-offs, they're lifetime reframing and changing your relationship to your thoughts and feelings. So, when it comes to that sort of, oh my God, will they see me anxiety, right? We actually can't control how other people respond to us, how they see us or don't see us, right? Um, this is I'm gonna, because I like to show my work here. All right. I just stopped my video. So who can jump in the chat and tell me what color tie I'm wearing? So 1 vote for no tie, 2 votes for no tie. Now, it's a simple sort of thing, but yeah, I'm not wearing a tie, right? And I do that with my college kids. When I'm teaching Psych 101, I'll leave the class and I'll take off my tie and I'll be like, what color tie was I wearing? And they'll be like, oh, it's green, blue, red. You weren't wearing a tie. People don't notice us as much as we think we do. In psychology, we call this the spotlight effect. We tend to think we're the main character. But that doesn't mean kids won't be vicious if they do notice. So it's about setting expectations that they're noticing you less than your brain is telling you. And if they do notice it, here are the skills you have to manage the situations, right? Can we find a friend? Can we laugh it off? Do we have a go-to strategy for pushing back on that thing? Like, yep, super cool that you're making fun of the brain tumor kid. You're a really tough high school kid. Good for you. Whatever that thing might be, but it's rehearsing those things and giving kids lots of tools in the toolbox, because anxiety sort of tells us, I only have one way to deal with this and I don't like it. It's bad. The more tools and strategies we have, the less they'll feel anxious. The less anxious they feel, the more gas they'll have in the tank to deal with other things that come up.
Thank you for that. Do we have time for 2 more?
Yeah, absolutely do.
Okay. Melissa's question is great. What do you suggest if it feels like my kid goes from 0 to 100 in no time? I don't even have time to catch it at the level of naming it. Do I write it out through the peak and then talk about it?
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about with riding out the storm. If your kid escalates very quickly, and some kids do, sometimes the best you can do is just hold space for it, right? And let them de-escalate on their own. And what you do is you set yourself up for future thunderstorms by learning from that one. So when your kiddo is calm, you say, hey, you got so angry so fast. And that was scary for me. I want to know what happened so I can help keep it from happening again. So we're not blaming the kid. We're not like, you got to keep your emotions under control, young man. It's like, hey, that was bad. And I feel like I could have handled it better. The more I know, the better strategy we can come up with. What made you angry? Where did the feelings come from? Why did you make those choices? The kid may not be able to tell you. They might be like, I don't know why I punched a wall. I was mad. Cool. But the more I know, the more I know. So ultimately, the more data we get, the more we can be proactive rather than reactive. But when you've got kids who escalate fast, remember that prefrontal cortex is trying to hold it all back. When that gets overwhelmed, sometimes the best you can do is just, give them space and help when we're ready.
Jumping off of that one, this question is also related. This parent, their child is 2 years old and he gets so frustrated, it almost seems like he's not there. He'll kick, bite. We want to leave him alone, but we also have to be near him so he doesn't hurt himself or his head. At that age, what would you do a little bit differently than what would you advise the parent or caregiver does a little bit differently than the 13-year-old?
Yeah. Whatever, everybody can be helpful. Everybody has tools and strategies they can use. Having realistic expectations on the age and functionality of the people involved is one of the best places to go. Because if you say to your kid, other 13-year-olds could ... then you're making your kid feel worse, right? And we don't want to do that. So it is really helpful to take an accounting of everybody's strengths and weaknesses, interests and disinterests before we start something. So, if you have a 3-year-old and all they want, like they want to help out, then they can make cards or art. They can bring stuffed animals. Like, then we're helping everybody help, but in realistic spheres for that. Because the last thing you want is your 13-year-old having to cook dinner for the whole family because you're taking your other kid to the hospital. That may be out of their skill set. They could pick up a pizza when it comes to the house, right? So it's just having those conversations and trying to be as intentional as you can.
Yeah. I'm going to ask one more. I'm going to take our last
Absolutely.
4 minutes with one more. My son was diagnosed at 4 and spent lots of time in the hospital where we pretty much catered to his every want and need. He had to do so many hard things, and it was hard for us as parents. Now we're adjusting back to home and school, and that's been hard. Additionally, separation anxiety has been difficult with adjusting to full day kindergarten. It's hard to know how much to push him and how much to just keep him home with me. We work closely with the school. Any tips?
I love that the school is willing to work closely with you.
Yes.
That's really great. I mean, schools like that are going immediately to heaven as far as I'm concerned. So the idea here is I'd like you to think about this through what we like to call bottom-up thinking. When we're stressed, we tend to flip to top-down thinking, which is how things should look. My kid, my 8-year-old should go to school, right? And when you think like that, any derivation from that is considered as bad or a failure. But if you flip it and do bottom up, the default is do nothing. The default is you never get your kid unclenched from you like a baby koala, right? So every step we take, if the kid gets to school for 5 minutes, that's a win compared to doing nothing. Now, and we can use that as because your kid is probably feeling that way internally. I've got to be perfect. And if I can't be perfect, I'm letting everybody down. It's like, listen, you put on pants today. That's a win. You ate breakfast. That's a win. You got in the car. That's a win. You got to first period, second period, third period, blah, 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 blah. Knowing that not every day, you're not going to be able to do all those things every day. But when you do bottom up thinking, it's aspirational and it's cumulative because you get a little bit extra bonus points for everything you accomplish rather than getting sucked into that all or nothing thinking.
Wonderful. Well, we thank you. I know we have gone 15 minutes over and we still had some questions that came in at registration, but thank you so much, Dr. Matt, for your time today. Thank you for all the participants that have been with us for the last hour and a half. We will be sending out the slides and we will send out the recording next week. So you will have all of this information and we hope you will gather with us again soon. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thanks for having me.